Welcome to another sparkling edition of Plank of the Week. It's that time for us to look at all of the idiots that have been really, really stupid throughout the course of the last week. Some organisations, some people, some politicians, maybe even some members of the royal family. I'm Mike Graham, this is talkTV. I'm delighted to say that we welcome back Andre Walker for the first time in a long time to the proper new studio, spanky new studio here. And Emma Webb, of course, makes her very welcome return as well. I feel like I should give Andre the first dibs because... you haven't been in such a long time, so off you go.
This was my first time back. You knew that it was going to have to be Meghan Markle.
Of course.
Look, I haven't been on for a long time, so I've got a billion different reasons.
Right.
But I have to say, I hate the fact she's moving back to Windsor, to Frogmore Cottage.
Yes.
So presumably she's not going to spend a lot of time there. If I was going to be serious, I would say that there's been that awful shooting in Texas,
yes.
and there she was, you know, trying to cry crocodile tears.
Yeah.
I just find her so transparently self-interested, is, I think, the phrase.
Yes, I think it's extraordinary, isn't it, how she manages to sort of insert herself. There was also a video, I don't know if you saw it earlier this week, of her at a polo match where Harry was in some polo team somewhere in California, because it's such a people's sport, isn't it, polo? And they won, and the trophy sort of appeared, and suddenly she appeared as well.
Yes.
In between all the guys who were all standing there in sort of polo uniform, and she just kind of inserted herself into the group and stood there as if that was where she belonged. And it was like, you weren't in the team. What are you doing? And she's trying to get her hands on the trophy. It's incredible.
Hang on, Mike. You're not in the team. That's what the Queen said to her
I
about
think
the
that's
royal
right.
balcony.
I think that's the problem. She can only be the captain. She can't actually be in a team.
That's right.
There was something so disgraceful as well about the way that she turned up. Not only the fact that she turned up to having taken a plane and then a car to get to the location of those children who'd been
like a long flight as well,
murdered.
like 3 hours or something.
So she wasn't just dropping in casually, but it wasn't just the fact that she turned up and that she turned up with a team of people to photograph her, very different from Kate showing up at the Sarah Everard vigil, no one around her,
happens
just
to be in the
very
same
understated.
city in which she lives.
Exactly.
Kate, you know.
But there was something even somehow worse about the fact that she turned up with that kind of like baseball cap and scraggy clothes. It was almost disrespectful. If you're going to turn up and you're going to use this as an opportunity for photos, at least show respect by not trying to dress yourself down so that it looks like you're grieving and you've just dropped by.
But you see this time and time again. So we've always said that she wants a cake and eat it, and what I mean by that is that she wants to be a member of the royal family, but she also wants to be a celebrity.
Yeah.
And she can't understand how she can't have the both of them.
No.
But I just think you see her every single time she spots a member of the royal family doing something.
Yeah.
She sort of, and you almost imagine her sort of angry in her home in California.
Well, I used to do this thing. Hey, Harry, why are they on the front page and I'm not? You know,
well,
that's kind of what she does.
I mean, I remember, was it Princess Charlotte's 6th birthday when Meghan Markle issued the first photos of her and Archie going out shopping, and you think, you're literally jealous of a 6-year-old.
She did that also, was it Princess Eugenie or Princess Beatrice at the wedding, where she turned up with one button unbuttoned so that all the speculation would be about her being pregnant. So she manages to turn absolutely every situation into something about her.
Well, of course, I've got a friend of mine who bumped into some lesser members of the royal family, and I'm talking about the third sons of dukes and people like that.
Just wandering about in Windsor.
Well, yeah, well, of course, that's right.
That's where he hangs out.
But of course, they all kept their mouth shut. But at Harry and Meghan's wedding, lest we forget that many members of the royal family were not able to attend to make room for people that Meghan had literally never met, like Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah. And George Clooney.
That's right.
Unbelievable.
Something wrong.
There is something wrong
up here.
What's your who's your first nominee?
My first nomination is Portsmouth City Council.
Excellent.
Because
and I know why.
they have told an organiser of a street party that they're not allowed to hang up bunting from the lampposts lest that bunting might be too heavy.
Yes, because that's not what lampposts are for, I think was their phrase.
It's not really the spirit of the Jubilee celebration, is it? That they're worried that the lampposts might start bending in if a few lightweight flags.
You do wonder, don't you? And of course, the other thing is they've all been told, every local council, to hand out advice to people saying things like, you know, be careful for tripping hazards. Be very careful about using glass because it might break and shatter and you might cut yourself. I mean, Where do they think they're talking to?
Yeah, well, I have to say, I mean, I'm delighted to hear that the worst thing that's going on in Portsmouth at the moment is bunting, because I will tell you something.
Portsmouth's a pretty rough old place, isn't it?
I had a mate of mine who worked at Portsmouth Naval Base, and let me tell you, it got fruity over there.
I did a show there once over one Friday or Saturday night or something, and I've never seen anything like it. The centre of Portsmouth at midnight. My God. Worst place I've ever seen.
I mean, that's the argument in favour of bringing back the press gang, isn't it? Get them all out.
Absolutely. Get them all on the ships and send them off around the world. What about also, who was it? I can't remember who said it, but when we saw the Union flags all going up in Regent Street, a bunch of lefties started saying...
Oh, saying that it looked like Nazi Germany. Looked like doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Actually doesn't look anything like Nazi Germany,
right.
Given that it's the British flag
I mean,
and it's Regent Street.
It makes you laugh, though, isn't it? Doesn't it? The way the sort of lefties, I don't know why. You know, Hitler was bad, but Churchill was worse. And you think, no, that simply isn't
But that's
true.
the thing, isn't it? That actually across Europe, when people see the Union Jack, that is the ultimate anti-fascist symbol.
I know.
That is the flag of the country that
actually liberated Europe.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
extraordinary.
no, and also, I mean, when I used to work at the European Parliament, they all used to sit there. And by the way, every MEP, I think almost every MEP who was non-white was from the United Kingdom or Ireland.
Yes.
Right? And I think every Asian MEP was from Britain. They sat there going, "You are racist in Britain." You're thinking, listen, race relations haven't been perfect in continental Europe by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, it's far more racist in Europe than it is here.
Oh, without doubt.
The idea that people make out this country is racist is just nonsensical and idiotic. I'm going to go with Ben Bradshaw as one of my first nominees, because I don't know whether you noticed last week, after the whole business of Partygate and Rishi Sunak's statement and all of that, Ben Bradshaw sent this tweet out. Apologies to my constituents who may have wished me to be in the chamber today. This is a day after Boris Johnson. But I couldn't be in the same physical space as that man and the craven Tory MPs keeping him there. I have full confidence in the decency of the British people to correct that at the next election.
Is he being paid to not do his job?
Exeter, right?
Yeah, it's like that one, the one from Exeter, who's that skinny, he looks like he'd fall through a grid.
Well, I'm not sure if he's that skinny. I haven't seen him lately, but certainly he's basically willfully staying away from his job, which I would have thought should be a firing offence.
Don't pay him.
Yeah, don't pay him. Don't let him claim any expenses. What's he doing?
I wonder what talkTV would do, or talk radio would do, if you decided that you didn't wish to be in the same room as, I don't know, somebody who works here. So who would that be, possibly?
I would say that would be Julie Hartley-Brewer. And what if I said, no, I'm not coming in if she's here. I'm just not doing it. You know, I can't possibly be in the same space. I mean,
of course, what happens with Parliament is you still get paid. It should be an attendance allowance.
Yeah.
Don't turn up, don't get any money.
Exactly right. But how ridiculously pompous, you know, because they just can't understand how Boris Johnson's getting away with it. They hate it, don't they?
It's a kind of performative fragility, isn't it? That it's not too dissimilar
it's literally
from
taking a dose of the vapours, isn't it?
Yes, let's get the Victorian smelling salts out. But it's not...
Come on, Ben.
Do that again, Mike.
Quick, catch him. It's not that dissimilar from the whole Nazi flag thing or the health and safety around bunting.
It's totally over sort of working something.
Yeah, really emphasising how fragile and how disturbed you would be by something just to make a political point, because that's what he's doing. He's not really worried that he's going to faint if he's in the same room.
Also, I don't share his confidence in the decency of the British people to make sure Boris doesn't win the next election, because I mean, I don't know whether Boris is going to even be here for that, but if he is, I don't see Labour winning it. Do you?
Well, I have to say to you, and I've said this before on Talk TV and other channels. Yeah. The reality is, I like Boris Johnson for the following reason. At least he was a hypocrite over the lockdown rather than a genuine believer. Yes. Right, KEIR STARMER, we'd still be doing it now, all in our gas masks and hazmat suits.
Well, he wouldn't be doing it and pretending that he thought it was a good idea, though.
Yeah, that's right, and I shouldn't preempt who's one of my next plans.
Is he your next one?
He is my next one, actually. Let's go straight into it.
It's almost like it was meant to happen.
I want to read this, and apologies, I'm going to have to do it from the script.
That's OK.
There was a Labour leader called KEIR who went up north for a beer. After work, they had a curry. He swore Ange was in Surrey, and when got caught, called it a smear.
Very good.
I think that's all right, isn't it?
Did you write that?
No, I nicked it.
OK, I was going to say.
Why didn't
you just say yes?
I mean, right, just cut that out. Cut that bit out.
Cut that bit out. He did actually write that. You could also do that thing that KEIR STARMER says, of course, I'm a man of great integrity, because he thinks if he says it enough, people will believe it.
That's absolutely.
I don't know why people would believe anything that people say like that.
It's exactly the same as when people say, I take full responsibility for this and then do nothing.
Yeah. I mean, that's Boris's genius, though.
Yeah,
I mean, he literally is. It's like when I do a show and I'll say, listen, and I want to talk about something, I say, look, I'm not going to talk about this. And all through the show, I just keep talking about it. And people start ringing, and I thought you said you weren't going to talk about it. And you go, well, maybe I'm not talking about it. I don't know. But Boris has got that same kind of ability to wind people up, which is what I love to do, right? And he just says, I take full responsibility, then doesn't.
Yeah, that's right.
He's just doing what politicians always do, but he's doing it more explicitly, and somehow that means he gets away with it.
I mean, as we're on here, I see a news break that yet another Tory MP has signed something to say that he thinks he should go.
So it's literally, it's literally a who are you of the Tory.
It really is. I think it's up to 28 now. Oh, great. I mean, they need something like 200 before they can do anything. Do you think he's going to go?
I think that the problem they have is that they who are they going to replace Boris with? Because Rishi's doing really badly in the polls.
Rishi's
who's going to step in and take over? Because it's the same with the Labour Party. The rules were such that everyone has broken them, so everyone's a hypocrite. So good luck trying to find a politician who's not going to end up embroiled in the same kind of scandal.
But my argument in favour of Keir Starmer being plank of the week, rather than any of the rest of them, is firstly, the man completely denies he's done anything wrong, which is utterly ludicrous.
And he keeps saying he's done nothing wrong, despite the fact that there's a police inquiry into whether he's done something wrong. How does he know?
He's obsessed with this view, and I'll try and summarise it as best I can, but I don't understand it. If you have a drink in Downing Street during a working day, that's entirely different to having a curry and a beer with somebody on a campaign day.
Well, I mean, his logic seems to be that it's OK to just do it once, but they did it loads of times. Yeah. Well, sorry, the Criminal Justice Act doesn't work like that. If you commit a crime, it doesn't matter how many times you've committed it. It's still a crime.
But he's copied Tony Blair, hasn't he? Because that sale of honours thing, you know, I think there was a case to answer. I don't know whether he was guilty or not, but I think there was a case to answer on the sale of honours. But what Tony Blair said was, if he was interviewed under caution or arrested, he'd resign as Prime Minister. Right. Well, of course, the Met Police absolutely toileted themselves as a result of that. Right. And so Keir Starmer's saying he'll resign if he gets a fixed penalty notice, blatantly to put pressure on Durham
That's
police.
actually even worse, because what he's doing there, because he's a lawyer and he knows that this is the case, that just being issued the fixed penalty notice, even simply by saying that he's going to resign, he's putting pressure on the investigation anyway.
Yes.
But he knows that that's not how it works, that if he truly believes that he's done nothing wrong, he should challenge the fixed penalty notice and take it to court. That's how the law works, and he knows that's how the law works.
Because you can challenge him, can't you?
Instead, he's using it again to perform and to make it seem that he's somehow more virtuous
and also
than Boris,
by his own admission, if he is, for example, because he's left himself quite a clever way out, if they say that he did break the rules, however, they're not going to give him a fixed penalty notice, he will still have broken the rules, and he will still, in his own mind and his own words, have committed a crime, because he's been calling the Tories criminals for getting them. So he must be a criminal if he gets one. But if they say, we're not going to penalise you, and we're therefore not going to give you a fixed penalty notice, he doesn't have to resign. Like, no further action, like what happened to Nicola Sturgeon. You know, she was spoken to by the police, but they were too frightened to give her anything. Because she shut them down.
But the consequences of that, the consequences of him saying that he would do that, or the consequences of him actually doing that, is that he's undermining, in a more fundamental way, is actually undermining the rule of law, isn't he?
Yeah,
because
totally.
Truly, if he and I know that I've already said this, but if he believes he's done nothing wrong, he should challenge that in court. But does he really believe that he's done nothing wrong? Is he just going to accept that if he's given the fixed penalty notice, that means that he's guilty?
There's one rule for him, and there's another rule for everybody else. We all know that. That's the rule with the Labour Party. Do as I say, not as I do. But remember something. All these enthusiasts for lockdown, let's run through them. You know, Boris Johnson had all these events in Downing Street, worthy parties, weren't they? Either way, he tried to get round the rules, right? Then we go to Nicola Sturgeon, who wasn't wearing masks on a couple of occasions. But we forget, Mark Drakeford, the week that he was arguing for a lockdown and social distancing, he was there doing his Diwali thing.
The Diwali thing, yeah.
And of course...
He got away with that, didn't he?
That's right. And remember, it wasn't illegal what he did, but it was massively hypocritical. But then the most unbelievable and egregious example was the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, who went to a non-socially distanced funeral with, get this, 3,000 people, right? Didn't bother wearing a mask.
Pretty sure that was more than they were meant to be.
And she argued, because she's an Irish Republican and there were no Garda her present to tell her not to do it because it was in Belfast, right? Then that didn't count. So actually, you can go through every single government of the United Kingdom is led by somebody who's a hypocrite on the issue.
Well, there's a funny surprise. Who would have thought it? Who's your second one, Emma?
Well, the entire cabinet.
There you go.
Well, for many of the reasons that you've already stated, but so many things this week that justifies the entire cabinet being nominated. One of them is this news that 1 million visas were issued last year, which was 145% higher than the previous year, despite COVID.
Right.
That the government never intended to send back.
Are these work visas?
These are general visas to foreign nationals, and that the government never actually intended to send any more than 300 people a year to Rwanda anyway. So it seems that it is an entirely useless and wasted policy. And we've seen also this YouGov poll that suggests that Boris Johnson, having gone from being the hero of the Red Wall, has somehow managed to bungle things so badly that now we're in a position where YouGov is predicting that the Conservatives could only hold on to about 3 of the 88 battleground seats. So all of that, and the fact
the
fact that they're actually the Conservative Party, people have been saying for a very long time the Conservative Party are no longer conservative, but now they have gone so far from the ballooning public health state and interfering with everyone's lives that now they're actually instituting economic policies that look like Corbynomics with this windfall tax on gas and oil.
Also, how can you be that unpopular giving away so much money to people? They've actually given 1,500
But this
quid
is the
to
thing,
people.
they've become like the Labour Party, which is the party that people voted for the Conservative Party expecting a Conservative government. Of course, you're going to lose votes if you become like the Labour Party that no one voted for.
The problem with the Conservative Party is sooner or later they'll run out of other people's money.
Well,
there we go.
That used to be a phrase that was used against other people. But there we are. It's a very odd world we're living in now, isn't it? I can't quite
Apparently, the only member of the Cabinet who didn't say the windfall tax was a great idea was Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes.
But that's one member of a Conservative Cabinet.
He's also the same guy who says that during the conversations in Cabinet about the COVID restrictions, he was also against those. But he never said it at the time, and he said, well, of course, I had cabinet responsibility.
Yeah,
so how do we know that he's saying it now?
Actually, I suppose, Mike, what you're saying to me is, why do we always end up hearing... So Jacob Rees-Mogg...
I was against it.
I will never say anything about what took place in Cabinet, and then every newspaper reports that he was against it.
Exactly right. And literally the same week, you know, that he was giving interviews saying, oh, no, that wasn't for me.
You old Fleet Street cynic.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Now, I'm going to continue with the Cabinet theme. Steve Barclay MP, he's the Chief of Staff of Boris Johnson. He was on the BBC the other morning. Now, unusually for me, I was listening to Radio 4 in the car. I don't normally. I think there was an advert and I switched it over. And there was, what's his name, Robinson, and Nick Robinson interviewing Stephen Barclay in a really, really kind of raspy, horrible sort of tone, absolutely sticking it to him. And the high point of the interview was when he revealed that it was after the Partygate report had come out, Sue Gray had sort of basically, you know, admonished him and it was fine. He started talking about this guy called Emmanuel Gomez, who was a cleaner, who apparently was forced to work at Number 10 during the COVID lockdown and unfortunately contracted COVID and died. And he said this to him. He said, his name was Emmanuel Gomez. What do you think his family, what do you think his friends will be thinking today when you say to them that the Prime Minister didn't know that booze was being bought in industrial quantities so that people could relax after work? Basically trying to accuse Boris Johnson of killing this guy, right? Saying it was all his fault. Turns out that this guy, Emmanuel Gomez, did exist, but did not work at Downing Street. He worked in the Ministry of Justice.
Wow.
So was nowhere near Downing Street or Boris Johnson. And he had to issue this grovelling apology on Twitter, which was so embarrassing that if anybody had done it in any other field of broadcast, they'd be fired immediately. I mean, it was all wrong. And yet, he's got away with it. He was on the following morning interviewing Rishi Sunak, and with a much more, shall we say, friendly tone. He was obviously told, you better not go for this guy, otherwise you're out of the job.
Is this just because anyone attacking the government now is, you know, fine, that if you're attacking the right person, then you can pretty much get away with it.
Well, probably.
It's the same as with the identity.
A schoolboy error. I mean, you'd think anyone in a research department would have known that he wasn't in Downing Street.
Well, or presumably you're assuming that somebody would care.
Right.
But anyway, it may well be that they're thinking... I'll tell you something that I found a bit strange this tour of the studios that Steve Barclay did was the way that he turned around on one broadcast and he said, "I find it particularly offensive that people were rude to cleaners because I'm from Lancashire."
That's a bit offensive, isn't it?
I don't fully understand. The other thing, it feels like a diss.
The other thing that I found hilarious was when Keir Starmer got up to speak after Boris Johnson made his statement, he was literally accusing Downing Street of making cleaners clean things. I'm like, well, that's what they had to come in and clean up the mess after the party. Well, that's what cleaners do, isn't it? I mean, sorry, I'm not dissing cleaners here, but the cleaners do come in and clean. They don't come in and make government policy.
Wasn't there some talk of there being some vomit or something they had to clean up, and maybe you could say...
Listen, we've all been tired and emotional at a company event.
And he licked my face once in the bar across the street. I don't know who cleaned up after that.
And then claimed to have coronavirus.
No, you did. The next day he said he had COVID. I'm like, what?
I didn't, but Mike, I didn't have coronavirus, but he actually didn't speak to me for about... Well, mind you, we couldn't see each other.
Well, no, that was the last
Is that why it's been so long since you've been
I thought he was still in quarantine.
He was seething with rage.
Well, I mean, I didn't particularly mind having my face licked. It was just the fact that you might have been giving me
attempted manslaughter,
a deadly disease.
The worst bit about that was that we ended up going, it's the last night of the pubs, me, you, Dave Chawner and something else, and we got absolutely...
We did get hammered.
And then, of course, nobody else was allowed into the building other than a few members of staff. So we had to do the presenter's friend, me and Chawner, for the whole week. I'll tell you what, getting up at 5 a.m. the next day, I was not feeling good.
I bet you're absolutely right. So who's your third plank?
I think it's got to be the Paris police,
yes.
or indeed the mayor of Paris, or indeed the sports minister. Or, you know what? Let's go with the French.
Just the French.
Let's go with the French. Mind you, do you know what? I was in Paris last week, and I was at Charles de Gaulle Airport, and I walked up and I said, "Hello, can you tell me where the help desk is?" And they go, "I'm sorry, I do not speak any English." And
Excellent.
I went, "I've got a problem." Thanks. And then he goes, I went, "But problem's the same word." It's literally the same word. But anyway, look. I think that sometimes we talk too much about the past, but there is no doubt that after the incident in Hillsborough all those years ago, what was it, 1987, something like that. I think it was April 87. Obviously, Liverpool fans are always going to be deeply distressed about the idea of having poor crowd control. They plainly done nothing wrong. They got tear-gassed for a laugh from the French police.
The French do like tear-gassing people, though.
Well, see, the French...
They tear-gas their own people.
The French are very good at rioting in a way that we're not.
Yes.
But I do think that it was a total shambles. And
I think you've got to blame UEFA as well for an awful lot of it.
Why don't we just put all Europeans in there together?
Yes.
I'm going to say every European, apart from probably a few members of...
Apart from the Spanish, because there was no trouble at the Spanish end, by the way. I mean, Real Madrid didn't get tear-gassed, so I think you have to be slightly, even-handed.
But the Spanish might have done a deal with the French.
Well,
Who knows? It could have been...
They might have done.
There could be a big conspiracy.
But I think some Liverpool fans do have a reputation for trying to get into stadiums without paying, and they're quite proud about it. Well, and they do that. And so I think that's partially a problem.
Wasn't this something that happened at the Euros? Didn't they also have people storming who...
Yeah, and that was also UEFA, who didn't get the security right, because all the security people just let everybody in.
Funnily enough, my dad was at Heysel, and he said that the unbelievable thing, he said when we got there, the stadium was derelict, and he said we got there with our cans of beer. They said no beer in the stadium, and he said the wall was only that big, so I just passed it to my mates. But I do think that we, as this country, should start standing up for Brits abroad, particularly football fans, and turning around and saying poorly trained police, bad plans, tear gas them all, and then blame us is not an acceptable position.
No, I think that's probably right. My final one is Joel Cooper, who is the son of Yvette Cooper and I think Ed Balls. So I'm not quite sure why he's called Joel Cooper. I might call him Joel Balls. He might not use that name for obvious purposes. He might think it makes him sound like a bit of a dweeb. But he was the leader, would you believe, of this event that happened last week in Warwick University, where Nadeem Zahawi went to address the Conservative Student Society or something like that. And he's a trans activist, and so a load of trans activists who all happen to be terribly white middle class, all just chanted in the room, "Tory scum! Tory scum!
Oh, my
Tory
God.
scum!" It was in one of the papers today. Anyway, it turns out he was the ringleader of it all, Joel Cooper.
He doesn't use his father's name because it's patriarchy.
No. Are you joking?
I believe that's the reason. I believe that's the reason.
Well, then, why does he just not use any name? Why does he just call himself Joel? You know, be like Madonna, just have one name. I don't wish to go with one or the other, so I'll just go with
maybe
nothing.
he should change his first name to a female name if he's so worried about the patriarchy.
Joella.
Joelle. Or
Joella Balls.
He could be Joe. Joe Balls. That's a good name, that. It's a great comedy name, isn't it? He could be a great comedian. Joe Balls. Anyway, he's clearly a plank because, one, it's quite intimidating, actually. If you watch the video, we were looking at it today. And, this kind of shouting thing seems to be a thing now. You've got all these climate activists who do the same. They turn up at where various Tory MPs are and just shout at them. And it's just like, and they've got this thing now where they're in, say if they're in a room where there's lots of tables, there's one at each table. And as one gets dragged out, the other one gets up and starts shouting. And it's really weird. I don't know what's going on.
It's a way of would you call it like filibustering? They're just,
so.
They're basically preventing
people from... They're just trying to disrupt the event.
Yeah.
And
it's a way of no platforming people if they don't actually succeed in no platforming them in advance.
I went to an event once, and there was this guy called Hen Mazik. It doesn't matter who he is, but he's actually a peace activist in Israel. But anyway, he was speaking at, I think, University College London. And basically, we arrived and there was apparently going to be some argy-bargy because he'd been in the Israeli Defence Force. Right. So anyway, what happened was the college authorities insisted that it was first come, first serve at the door, which meant all the protesters came in. Right? He made his speech. They all shouted at him. They all then walked out in disgust. And then the actual audience that had wanted all came in and had a very pleasant meeting.
I mean,
it was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my life.
Absolutely ridiculous. Right, well, we've actually got... I think we've got the 9, haven't we?
No,
we've got the 9.
I have not got my last one yet.
Haven't you got your last one? All right, go on.
Billy Bragg.
Go.
Billy Bragg, who I have to confess I hadn't actually heard of, and I am informed by Chuck that he was a singer-songwriter in the 80s and a very left-wing activist.
He's a very, very boring man.
And he, he's been trending on Twitter this week.
Has he?
Because firstly in the context of Ricky Gervais and all the criticism that Ricky Gervais got for his stand-up routine,
that
where
outrageous
he
claim that
held a mirror
wounds...
up to trans activists, and everybody said
funny.
that he was punching down, but actually he really is punching up because trans ideology has become, that radical gender ideology is the orthodoxy, so it's very much punching up.
Absolutely.
So Billy Bragg has been in the context of all of this, on Twitter, talking about gender-critical feminism. And I'll just read out the tweet for the full plankishness of it. He said, I'm in Hamburg at the moment. In the pavements are small brass plaques bearing the names of Jews who lived in the building opposite the plaque, who were murdered by the Nazis. That began with people deciding they could define someone by their biology alone. So what he's insinuating here is that women...
to be honest.
What he's insinuating is that... I had to read it a couple of times. But he's insinuating that women who are standing up for their sex-based rights, that is the base... our sex, our biological sex, is inalienable and is the basis of rights. It's the basis of human rights. And so women have obviously more recently been coming out and having no choice but to defend sex-based rights, and also LGBT people, also LGB people have been doing the same, because sex-based rights are also the basis of the rights of people to be same-sex attracted. So this is becoming a debate about protecting women, basically, and women's same-sex spaces. And Billy Bragg thinks it's appropriate not only to suggest that those women, in defending themselves, as the suffragettes did, to accuse them of being Nazis, but also, in this brazen way, thought that it was acceptable to draw a parallel with the Holocaust. I mean, it's just a no-go. You don't do it, do you?
Do you know what I think we should do? Why don't we all define everybody as a woman, and we have 2 categories, the ones with boobs and the ones that are hairy and fat, and just have 2 categories, but we're all women now, we can all agree, and it's all sorted.
Yeah, I mean, there was a great argument once, a couple of weeks ago on Piers Morgan's show, where an American sort of right-winger was arguing with somebody else about the abortion rights in America and all of that, and she basically said to him, I think it might have been Grace Blakely, said to him, well, you're a man, so you shouldn't be able to have any views on this anyway. And he went, well, how about if I just identify as a woman? And she was stuck because she had to admit that he could.
Checkmate.
It was checkmate. It was brilliant. And she just went, She just froze.
But that was exactly the same as the ludicrous situation. I think it was Baroness Jenny Jones, the Green member of Green member of the House of Lords. She said after Sarah Everard that what should happen is we should ban all
men should be allowed
in the
out.
streets.
Yeah.
Now I have to say I had some sympathy with the view that it was disgusting saying women shouldn't walk the streets.
Right.
We should have sent the police in to invade.
Yeah.
OK, fine. But then, of course, the obvious way of getting round that was just going, I'm a woman, and then going about your business as normal.
Exactly right. Well, look, we've now definitely come to the end. I'm just going to throw in, for carrying over purposes, for the 10th one, the Metropolitan Police, for this week, the Edmonton branch, who had a video of themselves dancing a rap song.
Oh,
I don't know if you saw that, as part of some community action base that they were doing. Just hopeless. So let's choose from the 3 down to 1. So why don't you tell them what your 3 are, and then you can choose your favourite.
My 3.
Yeah, your 3.
Literally my 3.
Your
OK,
3.
so it was Meghan Markle, KEIR Starmer, and all Europeans.
Everyone in Europe, apparently, who's to blame for the UEFA final.
Well, as tempted as I am by all Europeans, I think Meghan Markle.
I think Meghan Markle's a good one,
The classic.
OK.
All right, so give me
Portsmouth
yours.
City Council, the entire cabinet, and Billy Bragg.
I think the cabinet is a good one for that, and I'll give you mine. Mine are Joel Balls, Nick Robinson, and Ben Bradshaw. Which is a tough one, so.
It really is, because I really dislike Ben Bradshaw. He really is dreadful. But I'll tell you what, we've got to go with the rising star of Joe Balls Cooper.
Yeah, Joe Balls Cooper, that's fine. So Joe Balls Cooper, the cabinet, and everyone, Meghan Markle, sorry. So what do you think? Who's going to win it?
I think, can we give it to Joel? I'll tell you the reason.
We could.
Just because we've had the cabinet, we've had Meghan Markle.
Yeah.
He is somebody that ought to be seen as a rising star.
Yes.
And by winning this, he gets into like the annual final, doesn't he?
That's right. Actually, very good idea.
Go on.
So well done. For nobody, we never even heard of it until today. But Joel Balls stroke Cooper, Joel Cooper stroke Balls. Sorry, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right. Joel Balls Cooper. Well done. You are now the plank of the week. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Andre.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.